We have an awesome panel of AI experts with us here today. I will quickly introduce them all. Just by title, I'll let them introduce themselves as they present. But we've got John Manganaro, more commonly referred to here as Mango, who's our Chief Product Officer. Ben Miller, our SVP of Data Science. Dan Seals, our Chief Information Security Officer. And Jess Matthews, Vice President of Product. So huge expert panel with us here today. They are the reason you are all here. So I will go ahead and take my back seat and let y'all take it away.
I will find my mute button. All right. Thanks for the intro, Amanda. Quickly, what are we going to be discussing today? Just a quick top of the graph agenda item here. Want to pull back the curtain a little bit. I know when people talk about artificial intelligence and AI, it can often feel like it's a little black box, whereas some people are working behind the scenes. Our goal is to introduce some of the people that are on this call, some of our backgrounds in the industry in particular, the approach we take to process and governance internally, as well as security. So that's what Dan is going to be speaking to when he comes up. And at the end, we're going to actually demo Bonterra Que, which is our agentic AI capabilities that Jess Matthews and a slew of people inside of Bonterra have contributed to and built in the last few months. And so today we really just want to kind of show the faces behind the work, the processes behind the work, and show you a little bit of what we've been working on to pull the curtain back a bit so it doesn't feel like a black box so much. So our goal is to be transparent, to communicate and be as direct as possible with everybody joining the call and watching it after we record. So another quick pop-up poll here from Amanda. As much as there are positive aspects of what AI can provide in the market and for all of our users, there's also concerns. And I'd be curious just to kind of get some of the trepidation or potential negative outcomes that could be worrying folks about the impact of AI. We will look at those poll results while we speak, and we will do our best to speak to many of these bullets in our session today.
Yeah, so I'll leave that up for a couple more seconds here, but just off the bat, so y'all know, it's looking like a pretty strong 50-50 split between data security and environmental impact, with that data security taking a little bit more of the headway.
There we go, Dan. This is why we invite you, baby. Cool. So first section, a little bit of our approach to ethical AI. I'm going to hand the mic over here to Ben Miller in a minute. Ben's going to introduce himself, but one of the benefits of not just having a strong data science team with Ben Miller is also his experience in the industry. My own personal background, I came into Bonterra from an organization called Social Solutions, which was one of the groups that Amanda talked about at the beginning of the call. Our customers are caseworkers and social workers that are working with participants and their families who are in need of some pretty critical services. And so the data integrity and security standards of those products is something that we held incredibly dear and important to our work. And so as we go through some of this that Ben's going to lead, understand that each of us, when we introduce ourselves and speak, we are not newbies to the social good ecosystem. I've been involved with it for about 8 years now. And Ben trumps me on that for sure. And so I'll hand the mic over to Ben as we start to go through some of his work. He's also been on the circuit for a long time, presenting to fundraisers, talking about some of the work he did at Donor Trends, his company that became part of Bonterra. And I will go on mute and just get over to.
Thanks, Mango, and nice to see you all. Welcome to the presentation. And as Mango was suggesting, I think it's important just to reiterate that, like, it's not that we're not building with the sector. We're having the sector build it. Like that, the expertise that Mango brings, Jess, myself, Dan's been in the sector for a long time as well. Like we know what our clients' concerns are. Why we brought Dan here in the first place, and security is number one, right? So, I also think it's worthwhile just mentioning some of the fundraising AI work that was done early on for ethics. We're involved. I'm involved there as an ambassador. Then the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, trying to benchmark, involved there. So, really trying to do what I think is what ethics mean, which is carry out our responsibility. Ethics is responsibility. What are we responsible for? And we're responsible to take care of your data. We're responsible to make sure that we're transparent and that there's nothing we're doing that we have to hide. You know, we're responsible to make sure that things we introduce, models we build, don't exclude people, don't that we validate and make sure that they're reliable. And then one of the tenets that we also maintain is human in control, right? So the AI is here to assist, to accelerate, but the human is to drive, right? And the human is to tell us what the AI should and shouldn't do, right? And so all of this puts together is in our ethical framework, which we released a long time ago. And so we can go on to the next slide to sort of talk through a couple of the pitfalls that people have with sort of working with AI. And that is like confusing ethics with readiness. And what this actually means is that you might not be ready to dive into AI, right? Because you haven't even started to explore it yet. So it's hard to be responsible and ethical when you're not sure where the limitations of AI exist. And so I would encourage everyone here that you need to start getting more and more familiar and ready for AI, to put the governance in place, to put the acceptable use policies in place, to put the necessary things so that you are ready to take on AI. Fortunately for you, and we're going to talk about it here, we have been ready for some time. We've been working in AI since well before ChatGPT. And so we have all of this infrastructure, which has allowed us to do this, to build it and build the things that we're going to show with you today. And we can go to the next slide. Another thing that I want to make sure is that people don't equate perfection with opposing experimentation. So experimenting is how we get better, right? And so we have to try, fail, adjust, and learn, right? We need to figure out where those limitations are so that we can make changes and improve upon it. It's an iterative process. So a lot of times people will just sort of one shot test it out and sort of ask an LLM, you know, a question, and then the subpar response that they get, they disqualify AI altogether. So I don't want people to it's not enough to just try it once. You have to learn and understand where the edges are, and you have to, you know, experiment. As you experiment, you'll start to be more and more comfortable and realize it's not coming for your job, and realize it's not going to take away the precious work that you're thinking it would do, but actually it empowers you to do so much more. So with that, we can go on to the next one. And that is, I think the last one, there might be one more. But this is, again, you don't want to expect it to do it all. If you think that AI is going to just be able to do everything for you, well, then you'll be sadly mistaken, right? But it will be able to make things a lot easier, faster, quicker. It's been a great tool for me to expand my knowledge. I've learned a ton from AI. So I encourage you all to not think that you're going to get 100% alleviation from your work. Instead, you'll be able to get 15, 20, 30% boost to what you're actually able to do. And with those expectations, then you can come into AI and start to travel through our ethical framework and travel through our queue, which we'll show you, and it will help to explain what it can and can not do and where you're needed as the human. So we can move on to the next one. Oh yeah, one more is human. You're the oversight, right? Like, you are the human. I've said that a couple times now, but you have to be the one driving. That's the danger that we're all worried about. Terminator movie, whatever. We're worried about AI taking over. Well, it's up to us. It's our responsibility, not just Bonterra. It's your responsibility too. You drive. That's the difference there. So we can move on. Okay, and the last slide on is the environmental impact. This is a really hot topic. So I want to first acknowledge the fact that, like, the building and training of an LLM is very energy consumptive. It does take a lot of energy to build one of these, to train them. It does take a lot of energy to process these requests, and while that is true on the one hand, it is also true on the other that to extract AI from, like, the world and pretend like we can't, you know, like that there's this one monolithic thing, AI, that is causing environmental harm, is wrong. That's not the way it is. There's a lot more things out there. The drive that you make to drop your kid off at school rather than walk could be more energy consumptive than AI. And so, to put it in perspective, we wanted to let you know that, like, if you were to run an AI task per day on our system, since we are not training AI models, since we are not doing that, it would be equivalent to basically running a light bulb for 2 days for an entire year. So the point is that when you spread that really, really expensive training cost across all of the different uses that it will eventually get, millions and millions and millions, it becomes very small and minor. In addition, though, we don't just stop there. We partner with partners like AWS, who is already carbon offsetting all their carbon. They use data centers that are 100% renewable energy. So we also work to for the token limits that the token usage that we're putting through our LLMs. We try to be very, very economical and optimize those so that we are conserving energy at every possible point. And that is why we have such a small impact on the environment with our AI. So with that, I'm going to let it go.
Yeah, it's over to me now. So yes, I know some of the folks did bring this up in the poll, as Amanda said. Ben and the team are doing consumption monitoring, environmental impact assessment, just like this. So it's important to remember as we disaggregate some of the usage of AI. The second bullet point was very illuminating to me when Ben first educated me and some of the other members of Bonterra about that. It's not to negate, some of the bigger impact on some of these things, but when you come down to using a tool like Bonterra Que or experimenting with AI as an individual user, some of these bullet points were really interesting to me, and we wanted to share them with you all as well. So in terms of some of the faces in Bonterra and the governance structure that we have in place, this is a model that we welcome other software companies or other groups joining the call or watching the webinar recording to take into practice. It's something we take very seriously. So these are some of the folks on the executive committee for AI. You'll notice not just a group of wonderful smiling faces, but these are senior leaders and executives within the business. This is something we take serious at the highest level of the company, that we have a standard cadence and a process that I'll get into in a minute. And we actually have multiple committees that assess the work we're doing, the impact we're making, and review every use case to make sure it aligns with our core values as a business and our vision as a company. And so for those of you that aren't familiar with the vision that our CEO, Scott Brighton, set for us when he joined, we want to increase the percentage of giving of GDP up to 3% of GDP by 2033. In doing so, I believe that would be $500 billion with a B dollars going to social good organizations. And so when we talk about AI within a company like ours, and we want to balance being a software company and social good with the same type of financial goals and commercial goals that a lot of businesses have, we do not stray from the vision of this company. Our ethical framework for AI completely aligns with the vision of this company and the way we approach our work. And these people on this screen here take it incredibly seriously. And so we do have a standard cadence where this group gets together. We review some of the ideas before fingers touch keyboards on building any AI models, building any of the skills that Jess is going to show us here at the end of this time. This group weighs in on that, reviews it, and believe me, we don't say yes to everything. And so what do the two different governance groups do? The executive committee is of the left-hand column here. That was the group I just showed. Ben leads that group as the chair. We meet quarterly to not just review new ideas, but also assess the impact of current AI work that we've built. We do like to measure and assess what we're building to make sure it's actually providing the benefits to our customers, and we're not just building a bunch of smoke and mirror capabilities that are fun to market out on LinkedIn and other areas. We validate what we build, and we do that together with our customers, like we talked about a minute ago earlier in the presentation. And so we do have official votes and records. We do have an AI management system. We do review our roadmap at the executive level. And as we begin to launch, we don't just forget the things we launch. We go back and assess their impact. The working committee meets a bit more. And that's not just to share ideas, but to also make sure that what we're building, the use cases and ideas that people think about in the company, are aligning to the vision, do adhere to our guidelines. And by the time they get to the executive committee, the goal is to make it a very non-controversial meeting, because the working committee is doing their work. And so we do have official intake forms for people at the company. Bonterra is around 1,000 employees, and we know good ideas can come from everywhere. So we do encourage everybody in the organization to share those ideas. We do validate and run through risk mitigations, the types of data that models would be needing to use in order to perform effectively. We need to make sure technically we can build things. We also just really make sure that Dan and his team have a heavy voice in making sure that we're not exposing or sharing any really critical personal data outside of the Bonterra infrastructure, which is really critical for us. And so these meetings are not taken lightly. They are run on a standard cadence. They're official in terms of the executive committee voting and approving ideas. These are groups that this is not a side project at all. As we talk more and more about AI in general within Bonterra, this is at the front and center. It goes up to our executive team, it goes to our CEO, and eventually goes to our board of directors as well. So happy to share if anybody wants to reach out just more about how we implement this, how we structure some of the meetings, maybe even templates we use. I'd be happy to share, some of those things, because again, I think this is beneficial for any software company that's working with AI to think through and make sure that there are guardrails and governance structures in-house, and not just building whatever we feel like and launching it into the ether and crossing our fingers and hoping for the best. So on the other half of the poll, it sounds like Amanda said they really want to talk a little bit about the data and security within the Bonterra world. Really wanted to make sure Dan joined and he was able to talk to what his team does. I'll hand it over to him in a second, but the office of the Chief Information Security Officer is an incredibly important position. It may not come across as something that everybody understands or has heard of before. So with that, I'll hand it off to Dan. We're going to take a little bit of time here so he can explain what his team does and why it's really important for this work, and then we'll continue on with our conversation. So over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Mango. As Mango said, my name's Dan Seals. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer here at Bonterra, and I just want to take a few minutes to walk through how the Office of the CISO operates here at Bonterra, what areas we cover, and how all of these functions work together to minimize risk while still enabling innovation, especially as we think about responsible use of AI. Let's start with one most people think of first, and that's cybersecurity. This team secures our technology infrastructure from corporate IT all the way to our cloud environments. They manage detection and response capabilities, work with our managed security operations center, and handle escalations when something doesn't look quite right. In short, they're the blue team. They're the team defending the environment, protecting the systems, and keeping Bonterra safe every single day. Next up, we've got our product and application security. So this is the team that secures our products that Bonterra builds and sells. They're embedded with our engineering teams to make sure the code we write is secure, our applications are tested and hardened, that our customer data moves safely through our systems. They do the secure code analysis, threat modeling, penetration testing. Basically, they're the red team in contrast to the blue team. Their goal isn't to slow development down, it's to help innovate securely. Then we have risk management. The risk management team helps us understand the what ifs. They look across our technology, operations, and compliance to identify and quantify the risks we can prioritize what matters most, so we can prioritize. If it's a new compliance framework, evaluating, making sure and understanding our exposure before we move forward. They're also increasingly looking at AI risk, how we measure and manage it responsible, and how we expand the use of these tools. One risk that help us understand is compliance, is the compliance team, to make sure that we are adhering to the frameworks like SOC 2, ISO, HIPAA. They're the ones that can ensure Bonterra can actually prove our security posture to our customers, to folks like you, to our auditors, to our partners. They're not just checking boxes, they're enabling revenue and ensuring the trust for our customers. They provide, enabling us to directly support our business growth. Next up is the privacy team. Now, they are focused on trust. They work hand in hand with legal, product, engineering to make sure that privacy is built into everything we do. We want to go with a privacy by design principle, from data collection to storage to deletion. They help us meet our evolving regulations like GDPR, CCPA, CCRA, other state laws, and they ensure that our products follow as I mentioned, the privacy by design principles. And their mission is simple: protect personal data, preserve the trust of every organization and individual that interacts with Bonterra. And then finally, when these 5 functions, cybersecurity, product security, the risk team, the compliance team, and privacy are working together, they form a 6th area, and that's the governance and oversight that we're talking about today. That's where we create alignment, transparency, and accountability across the company. When all of these teams operate in sync, the result is actually greater than the sum of its parts. It's what allows us to enable the innovation safely and ethically. And that's how the Office of the CISO helps protect Bonterra, allow it to move fast, but do it in a way that's responsible. So ultimately, our mission in the Office of the CISO isn't just to protect Bonterra, but it's to protect Bonterra's mission. And we're here to make sure innovation, especially in areas like AI, happens safely, transparently, and with integrity. And that's how security, privacy, and ethics come together to fuel the trust and help Bonterra empower the social good sector even more effectively. Thank you.
There you go. So pulling that all in, again, Dan and his team have an incredibly comprehensive view of all of the certifications that we go through. If you would like a list of some of those, again, please reach out to us. They're publicly available. We will provide them to any prospect or customer or person that wants to understand the rigor that Dan and his team are put through. But it's not just internally. We do use third-party services to validate and provide compliance, accreditations to us. And so a little bit of just the alphanumeric soup you can sometimes see with some of these things. Dan and his team can provide those. We can provide basic definitions around why we're doing those and why they're important to our customers. But again, we're not trying to put these away in the black box. We want to be very open and transparent about what we're doing, why they're beneficial for our customers. So all you need to do is ask, and we'd be happy to share these with you. With that, little show and tell, and I will hand this over to one of the masterminds behind Bonterra Que, Jess Matthews, who will take the mic, and I'll keep flipping the slides.
Thanks, Mango. Hi, everyone. I am Jess Matthews. I'm one of our VP of products at Bonterra, and I've been so excited the last several months to be building what we now know as Bonterra Que. So you might be asking, what is Bonterra Que? And as kind of Ben Miller and Mango mentioned, our use at Bonterra of AI and machine learning is certainly not new, but what is new is the launch of our new agentic AI platform, which we now call Bonterra Que. The best thing to kind of think about it as is it's agentic AI that is purpose-built for the social good space and by people who truly deeply understand nonprofits, funders, supporters, donors, and the people who are driving missions forward. So what is Bonterra Que? It is built on, first and foremost, the Bonterra network, which includes a vast pool of nonprofits, millions and millions of supporters, and almost 25% of all corporate giving. So it's really driven by the kind of learnings of working across the social good ecosystem. And second, it's embedded into many of the Bonterra products today, and that number is growing minute by minute. Que is already part of all of the tools and workflows, or a lot of the tools and workflows that customers are already using. And I'm going to show a little bit of what that looks like here in a minute. And what that means is that no matter which product you're using, when you see Que in that product, Que already has a lot of the context and the tools that it needs to get the job done. So it's able to work right there alongside you inside of, for example, Every Action or Network for Good, and soon to be products like Apricot and others. Third, Que is truly agentic. So what we mean by that, if you're not familiar with the term, is that it doesn't just analyze, it actually takes action. So it can take jobs on behalf of our users, our customers, always keeping them kind of in the loop and with their oversight, like Ben mentioned. And the goal there is really so that they can spend more time on the things that really only humans can do, like building individual kind of personal relationships and really thinking about kind of overall strategy for how they drive missions forward. Que is really meant to help our users become superhuman and kind of really be able to spend more time doing the kind of the real work of driving a mission. So I'm going to have a look, if we go to the next slide, here's a look at what Que means for a product like Every Action, which is one of our fundraising and engagement products that serves the larger nonprofit market and helps larger nonprofits engage their supporters and raise more using embedded kind of intelligence. What Que means for Every Action is really, to begin with, these 4 agentic skills that are helping fundraisers drive additional capacity and really understand their donor base. So 4 core skills. The first is personalized coaching. This is really allowing Que to dig into the the vast kind of knowledge base of fundraising best practices and answer questions right there in the product and give, for example, benchmarked information right at a fundraiser's fingertips. So if they're not quite sure about the best practice around sending a specific email or where their nonprofit sits relative to peers, they can go to Q and ask that question right there within every action. Donor segmentation is another skill that allows a fundraiser to reach the right donors for a specific campaign and really search that kind of donor list. So Q can actually look at the donor list within every action and say which donors are best for this email or for the campaign that the fundraiser might be creating. And then the other two on here that I'm super excited about really gets into kind of that truly agentic capability, which allows Q to create an email or create a form that is very branded, personalized, and tailored to the organization and nonprofit's brand and mission. So Q is not just, again, providing advice. It's actually able to generate an email, respond to kind of feedback, iterate on that, according to best practices, and generate those items in minutes, things that would otherwise take someone potentially hours or days. And if we flip to the next slide, you'll see something very similar, a set of skills for Network for Good, which is our fundraising engagement software designed for smaller nonprofits. And the idea here is similar. You've got an agentic assistant in your Network for Good tool software dashboard that has a number of skills, some of which are already in beta and some of which are coming soon. So similar to every action, Network for Good has access to the personalized coaching skill, which again is giving advice based on a nonprofit's actual fundraising performance, lets you ask questions like, how has my donor retention changed year over year? How can I improve it? And again, tapping into that deep knowledge base of fundraising best practices to answer those questions with real data. Donor segmentation, similar to every action, a Network for Good user could ask you to find me the best donors for my next appeal, or find me the donors who are most likely to become monthly donors. Find me donors that are at risk of lapsing because I want to reach out to them one-to-one. And Q can go and search the donor list and find those specific donors. Donor stewardship is one that is unique to Network for Good that allows Q to summarize the giving kind of history of an individual donor, which is really great for a fundraiser who is going into a one-to-one conversation or isn't quite sure how to make that next ask. And then finally, similar to every action, Network for Good will also have coming soon Q skills for form and email creation. Again, the idea here is that Q is working kind of as an assistant, able to build all of the pieces of a kind of fundraising campaign for a kind of fundraiser, so that they can spend more time on those individual relationships and kind of cultivation. But that's enough of me sort of talking about things. I think folks would probably appreciate if I could actually show you. So I think we have a little video where you can see Q in action.
Practice this. I'm going to look to my colleagues to make sure when I start this, the sound comes on, because my biggest fear is just having a mute demo video go. So here we go.
Here is Network for Good, which is Bonterra's fundraising software designed for smaller nonprofits. Small nonprofit fundraisers are juggling many responsibilities, and in fact, they're often referred to as the chief everything officers. But with Q, which is embedded right inside their Network for Good dashboard, they can feel superhuman. They get a smart and always-on assistant that understands their nonprofit's data, has access to decades of fundraising best practices, and can take action. And in fact, Q has already identified several opportunities for this nonprofit to improve their fundraising performance. I know that donor retention is one of the hardest parts of fundraising, so let's ask Q to search for donors likely to give again. Q is searching our fundraising best practices knowledge base and analyzing this nonprofit's historic fundraising data to come up with not only detailed analysis and a list of actionable strategies, but also a list of actual donors that I can include in a retention campaign. And if I'm planning to do one-to-one outreach for any of these individual donors, Q can also analyze and generate a summary for that donor, complete with historic giving patterns and communication preferences to help personalize that outreach. So with these tools, Q is saving a small nonprofit fundraiser critical hours and helping them fundraise with more confidence. Now I'm going to switch over to Every Action, which is designed for a larger nonprofit audience. And as you can see, this is the same Q experience. Q is designed to work across Bonterra products so that no matter which software you're using, Q is always there and always has the right context and tools for the job. For our larger nonprofits, Q is not only able to analyze fundraising performance, but can also create bespoke emails and fundraising pages for any campaign or audience. Now I'm going to ask Q to generate an email, encouraging my lapsed donors to give again to a specific program supporting at-risk youths. And behind the scenes, the Q agent is researching best practices that are relevant to this campaign and analyzing the nonprofit's past email performance history to generate an email that matches the nonprofit's look and feel and brand voice. Great. So Q has created an email that follows best practices, reflects the nonprofit's unique tone of voice, and uses subject lines and copy similar to other high-performing emails in their email database. Q has even provided merge fields so that this email will be personalized for individual donors. And I can ask Q to make changes. So let's ask for a language that is more casual. And now we can see that Q has updated the language to make it feel more conversational and approachable. With these tools, Q helps organizations raise more, fund smarter, and deliver services faster so they can focus on what really matters, having impact and building real human connections.
We did it. All right. Now
We
coming
made-
to the Q&A.
We made it to sound on. Well done, everyone. We'll go ahead and spend the remainder of the time diving into your questions. If you have other ones that come up, feel free to keep popping them into the Q&A. Like I said, we'll get to as many of them as we can. I did want to just flag another poll up on the screen, though, for folks who have now seen a little snippet of Q, and you might want to dive a little deeper depending on kind of where you fall in the Bonterra ecosystem or are new to Bonterra. I'll leave that up so that folks can tell us if they're interested in learning a little bit more, and if so, where and how, and we'll be sure to follow up with you. So I will leave that running for a few moments while we address our first question, which came very early on in the presentation. I think also is a nice segue to what we just showed with Q, which came from Ashley, who had asked, when using AI to communicate with our audiences, how do we make it sound more human? Saying that I often feel like I can tell when AI is used to write, copy, emails, etc. So can we shed some light on that?
Yeah, I can talk to this a little bit, and then maybe Ben wants to add a little bit. But I love this question because I think AI generated content is kind of increasingly everywhere. But we know it can also be a huge time saver for a nonprofit, and you want to use these tools to kind of be efficient. So, but while making sure that donors are still getting that kind of personal touch. So it's a tricky question. So I appreciate the question. I think my general advice: use Q or use AI. Really just to get to a kind of first draft. So don't, use something like AI or Q to, fully kind of offload the entire responsibility of writing communications, as tempting as that might be. I think tools like Q are really great at getting to a first draft that will sound very similar to your organization's voice and tone. But that last kind of scan through, making sure that individual choices of words and things like that are in your own voice, your nonprofit's voice, it can work wonders for making that outreach feel really, really kind of personalized. The other thing that I think is just really, important here is making sure that whatever tool you use, but Q included, has the right context. Because the more context a tool, any AI, but especially Q has, the better, and the more personalized, or the more it's going to hit the mark in terms of tone and content. So, if you ask, hey, can you write me a thank you to a donor for their recent $500 gift? That's going to generate a pretty basic kind of boilerplate standard, what might feel very AI generated response. But if you have the kind of context on that donor and maybe their history and things like that, then that communication might feel a lot more personalized. Or, if you're giving context on things like the mission and the goals of the communication, that's going to make the output a lot more a lot more kind of personalized. And that's, you know, I'll slightly plug here that that's what makes Q great, is that it already has a lot of that context from day one. So you're already kind of at an advantage over an off-the-shelf tool like a ChatGPT or something like that.
I think I'll stop presentation so we can just put our faces on the screen. How about that?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Jess. Ben, I don't know, did you want to add anything to that?
I echo everything just said, but I do want to say that, like, thanks to Dan and his team, you know, we were able to have contractual agreements and such that, like, we can train some GPTs internally, not for us, not for our good, but I have trained my own, and by giving it different like context of what I write, how I write, and the suggestion I was going to make is, if the more that you can provide a persona that is you, that your persona to the GPT, the better it is at sounding human and not like the machine. And then just want to further reiterate what Jess said, which I think was incredibly important and perhaps getting misunderstood with what we're trying to say, is that the human needs to still be the driver. And that's why it's important you make it human if the AI doesn't, right? So I just want to echo that.
Awesome. Thank you both, and thanks for echoing that one, Ben. The next question I think is also going to come your way. This one came in when we were discussing the environmental impact, and looks like Elias was curious on how the energy demand is calculated. You know, the stat that you shared about like a 60-watt light bulb. Could you just share a little bit more about like kind of how we got there, and how that's being calculated internally?
Sure. And there's a lot of reports out there. If you want to have fun one day, you could go search all of the different research that's underway, which is actually really quite illuminating. But while I was trying to figure out what the environmental impact of Bonterra was, you know, one of the reports that I came across was a scientific report 2024 study. And it said in it that Llama 3, which, you know, was what they were studying, when it's generating a 500-word response, had estimated the kilowatt per hour of electricity at 0.0195, and that is what we then extrapolated to come up with the light bulb use, to figure out, well, how much does it, you know, take to run a light bulb, and how long would it last if you use that same amount of energy? And so that's how we came to it. But you know, like I was mentioning earlier, the big consumers, and I think someone had mentioned this as well, is the training and the data centers, where they're consuming a ton of energy, but partnering with a AWS, you know, and someone who takes this serious, their data centers are much more efficient than others, and that's why, and they're carbon neutral, so that helps to offset the usage there.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate you sharing. Switching gears a little bit, I've seen a couple of questions asking just a little bit about Q's models specifically. So I'll ask these two. One from Sally asking, kind of saying like, you know, when Q responds with best fundraising practices, is it pulling from client data in aggregate, or from other sources like fundraising research, the general internet? In other words, really like, what's it trained on, and how much real-time data does it include? And additionally, how does this affect the proprietary client information?
I'm happy to take it on, but Jess, did you want to jump in?
No, go for it, and then I'll yeah.
Yeah. So first, I want to attack the word train. Like I don't mean to say that, but like education on the words really matters here. And when we talk about training a large language model, we're talking about something different than what we did, which is create a knowledge base that was able to be used as a retrieval mechanism to come in and find best practices and find additional information. We are not in the business of training large language models. That is not something we do here at Bonterra. And therefore, we are not training on your data in that way. We do have predictive models. We do use, you know, AI in a lot of different ways, and AI can mean things other than large language models. So that's why it's really, really important for words to actually matter and mean. I think how we utilized it now, or I can pass it off to Jess now, but like we pulled from some of the best resources, you know, that we had already. Like we had guides and how-tos on how to fundraise. And we also scoured the internet and found some of the best practices. We vetted everything, put it into our knowledge base so that some of the ways that it knows how to fundraise are because we did the due diligence of making sure this is tried and true, evidence-based fundraising best practice type of thing. And with that, I'll hand it off to Jess.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would add there is that we are, think about what is it trained on. We are not using customer data to train our own large language models. We are using largely foundation models, right? And layering in our own kind of customer data. Any models that we have, like predictive models that Ben is mentioning, are use kind of aggregated, anonymized information. And so it's very much focused again on making sure that customer data is not being used in the training of these large models in a way that could reveal any kind of sensitive information. So just want to make that very, very clear. And a lot of this information is public for people to kind of see on our website now. So you can kind of dig into a lot of the more technical detail there.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you both. Really appreciate all of the thoughtful questions coming in. This is why we wanted to have this conversation and this open discussion, is because there's a lot to tackle and a lot of unknowns. So just want to thank everyone for their thought and their question as well, and the responses here coming from our panel. It's why we brought the experts. We brought in the big guns for today's session. Coming to the next question, this one came in from Sean, who had said, wondering how to use both surveys in every action and standardized ways of logging in our notes from one-on-ones with donors and volunteers to increase the searchability and segmentation of our every action volunteers and donors. Will Q then search on this additional info kind of just beyond giving history?
Not currently. We're not, but if that's something you want, and I need to look and dig into it more. I don't know, Jess, if you're familiar with this.
Yeah. So sorry. So the goal here for every action is right now there's very basic donor segmentation capabilities with Q, but over time and really in the next couple of quarters, our intention is for that to become a lot deeper. And so being able to use sort of the more detailed individual to a nonprofit data points that you have about your donors, and for it to learn about that over time. So if you have specific names that you use for specific types of information that you capture, Q being able to kind of understand that and keep that information over time, just to make it easier to search information that you're capturing about your donor base that is unique to your organization and nonprofit. So that is really the goal. It doesn't do that today, but while we are in beta, but this is exactly what we are working towards.
Perfect. Appreciate the added insight. And yeah, I feel like this is, kind of just the beginning, right? And so that all that feedback is really helpful of what people want to see and what you want to be using this for. Shifting gears a smidge here and bringing it back to Dan for some maybe more security specific questions. Joey had asked if someone could please kind of restate what AWS's involvement is. Like, where is the data stored on AWS servers? Is it just Q hosted? Will they ever have access to our donor and supporter information?
Excellent. Sure, I can take that one. This is a great question, and I hear this one a lot. Bonterra, like many modern SaaS platforms, uses AWS as our cloud infrastructure provider. So yes, your data is hosted on AWS's secure cloud platform. Now, it's very important to distinguish what that means. AWS is responsible for maintaining the physical security, the networking, the infrastructure layers of the cloud. Bonterra is actually maintaining full control of that data, the applications, and the permissions that sit on top of it. Amazon, and part of this one speaks to me specifically because of the concerns around AWS and the folks that lead that organization. Amazon doesn't view, use, interact any donor, supporter, or customer information. They can't they can't see that data. It's encrypted. We control that. And then they also talked, or this question also mentioned, third-party service providers. My team does a very rigorous security, privacy, and compliance reviews of all of our third-party service providers. But some do exist. Things like email delivery, our payment processors, SMS, things like that. But we also have data protection agreements in place with those as well. So in short, AWS provides the secure foundation, but Bonterra manages and protects the data, and the information remains fully under our control.
All right, thanks, Dan. Appreciate the clarification from you. All right, coming back to a little bit more of the use of Q, right? And folks curious about that. A question came in asking if Q is always on, right? How do we turn it off, quote unquote, if we're not sure how or whether to use it?
Yeah. Well, I hope that conversations like this will, help you feel more comfortable using a tool like Q. And if not, we'd welcome a further conversation. But for us, ethical AI really does mean humans are in control, and that's kind of the trust that you are in control of how your data is being used is really at the core of everything we're doing. So customers will always have the ability to opt out of use of Q. And other AI features, simply just reach out to support, and they can make sure that all of the kind of related features are disabled. They'll be very happy to do that. But again, we'd love to chat with a customer who has concerns, and we can help answer questions specific to their use cases.
All right. Okay, got just a couple of minutes left, so we'll probably get to maybe two questions. I know one came in earlier of some folks asking if it's possible to share any of the data that we have here at Bonterra about the energy usage via AI. And I think that's an awesome question. I know that's something that we want to follow up on, but I don't know if anyone wanted to add any additional color to that one.
Yeah, I can take that, and then Ben maybe has other thoughts. But I would say, we during our vendor evaluation process, we spend a lot of time looking at energy usage and comparing energy usage of different vendors. So we've seen kind of in aggregate the data on kind of how our vendors stand when it comes to energy use. We don't have. It's kind of difficult between the different ways that we are using kind of computational power as well as the actual like LLM models to figure out exactly the cost of our usage. But it's a conversation I really want to pick up with AWS, which is our primary vendor. So that's a follow-up for us that we'll take to the team and see if we can get more specific information for you. So I'd love to follow up with the people who asked separately from outside the webinar, but also I think this is a great thing for us to work on publishing and making more transparent. But like I said, we do assess every vendor and every use case for energy use, including when we get down to choice of specific models to make sure that we're reducing and minimizing the impact of the overall aggregate feature use of Q and other AI tools.
Wonderful. Ben, anything you wanted to add? I saw you're off mute, or is that just
I'm just staying off mute in case you need to answer any questions, and I think I have a more spicy response, so I'll leave it alone.
Okay, sounds good. This is probably a quick one. Just folks curious about like how Q works and what it works with. And the question was asked, can Q work with Microsoft and other CRM systems that are not in the Bonterra family, or is it just within the Bonterra product suites?
Currently just within the Bonterra product suite, though watch this space.
Awesome. All right, let me dive into some of the other questions, see how many more of these we can answer. I don't know if anyone else has any they want to tackle that they've seen come in whilst I was pulling up some other ones.
I will just address, I know that Frank had a question in there related to whether it will or will not. When I was mentioning it will not take your job, I was really referencing the caseworker, the fundraiser, like things that are inherently human and need that human connection. I wasn't trying to talk more broadly about AI and jobs in general. that is a question beyond, I think, the scope of what we're doing here and beyond, I think, even our time and space, because it's going to change in the next 5 years quite a bit.
Awesome. Thanks for bringing that one back. I know that was one from earlier on today. All right. Looks like I saw another question come in about grant scoring, that somebody said they saw that as one of the capabilities. Can somebody share what that looks like in Q, and could it potentially eliminate, perfectly good qualified grant applications?
Yeah, so it's important to know that when we work with organizations that are providing grants and funding, they decide how to score. And so what we're really doing is providing a rubric for them to say, this is how we assess and qualify grant applications. Bonterra is not making those decisions on behalf of the funders. So our goal is not to tell the funders how to score their grants. Our goal is to teach our tool to learn how the funders score those grants and help prioritize the grant applications. So we are not eliminating anything. We're not disqualifying people. Q simply learns what Foundation ABC wants to look for, how they're scoring grants, and we provide that capability to them within Q, just to clarify that use case.
Also, the governance structure we have in place really flagged a lot of building in that way, where you go through in front of 12 people to say like, hey, is this a good idea? And can we use this? Is this, and ideas come up, and we build it more thoughtfully to make sure that we are exactly not doing those sorts of things. So just a call out to the process for helping us build more safely.
All right, I know we are coming up on time, and our panel here is back-to-back booked. So I promised them we would not go over time. So I'm going to take this time now to really just thank this wonderful group of people for, putting this much thought and effort, not just behind today's presentation and really candid conversation, but also behind the building of Q, right? We hear those top concerns, and we really wanted to make sure, to Mango's point earlier, we were able to pull back that curtain and, share a little bit of our thoughts about your top concerns and how it was built into Bonterra Que. So thank you all so much for your expertise, for the hard work that you put in, and for all of the effort and energy that has gone into Bonterra Que. For the folks who joined in on the conversation, thank you so much for being here, again, for your thoughtful and insightful questions, and for taking the 57 minutes out of your very busy day to spend with us. We really hope that it was valuable. We hope you got a lot out of it, and we're excited to see what y'all can do with Q. So thanks everybody so much. All right. Have a good one, folks.
Thank you.